Take the 5 notes of a minor pentatonic scale, the safe little box that almost never sounds wrong, and slip one extra note in between 2 of them. Just one. That single addition is the entire difference between something pleasant and something that sounds like the blues. It is the growl in a guitar solo, the cry in a saxophone line, the dirt under a great vocal. Think about the music that lives on that sound for a moment. Early Delta blues recorded on a porch, electric Chicago blues, the rock and roll that grew straight out of it, the soul records, the funk, half the guitar solos you have ever loved. Underneath an enormous amount of it is this one move. And here is the part that should make you sit up. It is not some advanced secret reserved for jazz professors, and it is not a technique that takes years to learn. It is one note, dropped into a scale you may already know, sitting on a key your hand can reach without moving an inch. By the end of this, you will know exactly which note it is, why it has its own nickname, where it lives on the keyboard, why it tugs at your ear the way it does, and how to actually use it in a line. So before we add anything, let's get clear on the scale we're adding it to. We are going to build everything in the key of A, because the minor pentatonic in A is one of the friendliest, most familiar shapes on the whole instrument, and it keeps the math simple. Here are its 5 notes, climbing up from the bottom: A, our home note, then C, then D, then E, then G, and finally back to A on top, an octave higher than where we began. Play slowly up through those 5 and listen to how smooth and open they sound. There are no sharp clashes, no 2 notes grinding against each other, nothing that begs to be resolved. That is the famous safety of the pentatonic. It is 5 notes you can lean on all day long, in almost any order, and barely ever hit something that sounds like a mistake. That is exactly why it is the first scale handed to so many beginning guitarists and improvisers. But that safety is also its limit. On its own it can sound a little too clean, a little too polite, like it is missing some grit. Now look closely at one particular spot in that climb, the gap between the 4th note and the 5th note, between D and E. On the keyboard those 2 notes sit a whole step apart, which means there is an empty black key sitting right in the middle of them, completely unused by the pentatonic. Every other step in the lower half of the scale is tight, but this one leaves a door open. Hold that gap in your mind, because that empty space, that one unused black key between D and E, is exactly where the blues is about to move in. The note we drop into that gap has a name of its own. Musicians call it the blue note, and in plain theory terms it is the flattened 5th. The name itself tells you everything about how the note behaves. Start from the 5th degree of the scale. Counting up from the home note A, the 5th note is E, and a perfect 5th is one of the strongest, most stable, most consonant sounds in all of music. It is rock solid, your ear trusts it completely. Now take that stable E and lower it by a single half step, the smallest move you can make on the keyboard. You land on E flat, the black key sitting directly below E. That lowered 5th, E flat, is the blue note, sometimes called the flat 5. And here is the lovely part: E flat is precisely the note that fills the gap we spotted a moment ago, the empty black key between D and E. So the blue note doesn't replace anything in the pentatonic, and it doesn't push any other note out of the way. It simply squeezes in alongside the notes that were already there, filling the one wide space in the lower half of the scale. One small half step down from a rock-solid 5th, and the entire character of the scale is about to change. So let's build the full blue scale now, all 6 notes, slowly, from the bottom up. We begin on A, our root, our home base. From A we step up to C. From C up to D. So far this is identical to the pentatonic we already know. But now, here it comes, the new arrival, E flat, the blue note, the black key we just lowered the 5th onto, sliding straight into that gap. Then immediately up to E, the natural 5th, sitting right next door, one half step higher. Then up to G, and finally home to A on top. Count what we touched: A, C, D, E flat, E, G, and A, 6 notes instead of 5. Now listen to what just happened in the middle of that climb. In the plain pentatonic, the move from D to E was one smooth whole step, that open door we kept pointing at. But now, with the blue note threaded in, that single jump has become two tight half steps stacked back to back, D up to E flat, and then E flat up to E. 3 notes in a row, each only a half step apart, packed tightly together right in the heart of the scale. The blues scale, then, is nothing more mysterious than the minor pentatonic with one extra note dropped into its widest gap, turning a clean, smooth jump into a slippery, chromatic crawl. And that crawl, that little cluster of half steps right in the middle, is the exact sound you came here for. Now for the question that really matters. Why does this one extra note carry so much weight? Why does the blue note sound so expressive, so tense, almost like a voice that's aching or complaining? The answer is that this note refuses to sit still. The flattened fifth is the most unstable, the most restless distance in all of Western music. Measured from the home note, that span from A up to E flat is exactly 6 half steps, which is the tritone, the dead center of the octave. It is the interval that old church musicians were so uneasy about that they literally nicknamed it the devil in music, because it sounds so unresolved, so suspended, so desperate to go somewhere. So when you play E flat against the home note A, your ear doesn't want to rest there. It wants that note to move. And here is the genius of where it sits, because it has somewhere perfect to go. The stable, restful, natural fifth, plain E, is sitting just 1 half step above it, waiting patiently to catch it. Slide up that half step from E flat to E, and you feel the tension dissolve into pure relief. That is why the blue note works best not as a place where you stop and rest, but as a place you move through. You lean on it, you bend up into it, you let it ache and grind for a beat, and then you slide off it, up to the natural E, or back down to D, and that little snap from tension into release is the whole emotional engine of the blues. The note hurts on purpose, so the resolution feels earned. Let's put all of that to work and hear it inside a short lick, the kind of phrase a blues guitarist might toss off without even thinking. Start down low on the root, A, to climb up through C and up through D, nice and clean. And then, instead of stepping smoothly up the way the pentatonic would, we hit the blue note, E flat, and we let it sting and bend for just a moment, holding that tension. Then we release it, sliding up the half step to E, the natural fifth, and the ache resolves. From there we carry on up through G and crown the whole phrase on the high A at the top. Play it again in your head and listen for the difference that one note makes. Without the blue note, it is a tidy, pleasant little pentatonic run, perfectly nice and completely safe. With it dropped right into the middle, it suddenly has grit, it has voice, it has attitude. It is the blues. And that, in a single sentence, is the whole lesson. You already had the 5 notes of the pentatonic, and adding just one more, the flattened fifth slotted into the gap between the 4th and 5th degrees, is exactly what turns 5 safe notes into the 6 most expressive notes in popular music. Learn where that one black key lies, learn to lean on it and then let it resolve, and you can speak the language of the blues in any key you like, anywhere on the keyboard.